And Liz, tell us what areas of the world you're researching.
Oh, well, I'm lucky in that my brother put together extensive family trees just by talking to the older people in our family, before the days of online databases. And so I eventually want to get to all of it, but right now I'm focusing on a branch that comes from Poland. I mean,
That's
they are all from Eastern Europe, but this particular branch is from Poland.
well,
Um,
that's great. Debbie's kind of a Poland expert, so
okay.
kind of a Poland expert. Um, so I know that she'll have lots of helpful hints for you. Welcome. I hope
Okay.
you enjoy your membership with
Thank
us.
you. Thank
Uh,
you very much.
I want to thank both Ava and Lee Nackman, who have helped us with the technology stuff and also getting out the notices that our meeting was going to be a little different. David is with us. We weren't sure if he would be or not. He's got cousins coming to see him this afternoon. We're not surprised that David has cousins. Um, I wanted to remind you that the International Association of Jewish Genealogical Societies is meeting in Philadelphia in August. This is about the third time that they've tried to have this meeting in Philly. The first time was during COVID, then they did it once by Zoom. Anyway, this is the real thing. All sessions live and in person in Philadelphia, which is my hometown. And I am actually planning to attend. And I see that Jarrett Ross, our member, is also on the agenda. And if you've got any Philly connections or if you're interested, sign up. The early registration discount is available until June 15th. So if you're thinking about it, this would be a good week to go ahead and register.
Barbara, are you going this year? I know you're thinking about it, right?
I'm 90 to 95% sure.
If you haven't been to one of these conferences, and I think I've been to 4 of them, even when you think you finished your family tree, you are going to learn so much more and get so many more leads and learn about resources. I think the most important of which are some of the experts who are there, who can also give you some really good direction. So it's Philadelphia is about a 6-hour train ride if you want to use Amtrak from Durham or Raleigh. And there's a lot to do in Philadelphia that's Jewish and not. Am I right about that, Barbara?
That's correct. There's a wonderful Jewish museum called the Weitzman Museum. There's all kinds of wonderful museums. There is a ton to do.
Lots of good restaurants.
Yes. And believe me, when I was growing up in Philadelphia, there were not good restaurants. So.
Just to let you know, I'll be there and I'll be doing two beginner program sessions on Sunday.
Oh, nice.
So if anybody's a beginner, and Barbara, I may be in touch with you with your Philly roots.
Okay. Are you in Philadelphia?
No, I'm in the Charlotte area.
Oh, okay.
In like Norman area. Okay. But I have to gear the programming towards Philly because that's
yes.
The majority of people to be from.
Philadelphia actually had an immigration station at the foot of Washington Street and the Delaware River. Mm-hmm. And it was fairly big. It wasn't as big as Baltimore, but it was fairly big. Anyway, I could talk about Philadelphia for a long time. We have 2 upcoming programs scheduled. One is July 14th. It's a hybrid meeting. And it's at the Cardinal in North Hills. Al Gershman is going to do a workshop on getting started in DNA and Jewish genealogy. And that's where I am getting started. I've been at getting started about 10 times. So I'm going to try again. And I think that's sort of the pattern with DNA for some of us. On August the 18th, Dr. Glenn Dinner is going to talk about his book, Yankel's Tavern, Jews, Liquor, and Life in Poland, which I think is interesting. I have one Philadelphia family in my tree that that owned a liquor distributing company, so I can definitely relate to his topic. Anyway, those are our next two meetings. David, do you want to say anything about the treasurer's report?
Very little. We didn't have a meeting last, I guess it was in schedule for May. I did a treasurer's report then. At the June report is just about the same. We have this one new member that we added, and our bank account is at almost $4,000. So very little change actually in the last several months.
And now our
We
speaker
have
knows that
64 members.
our speaker knows that that her check will clear because David is taking good care of our funds.
Anybody have any questions for David? Thank you, David.
Welcome.
Barbara, before you start the program,
Yes.
can I just make an announcement
Sure.
that we've started a Jewish genealogy club. It's not a JGS at Temple Kol Tikva in Davidson. So if anybody is in the Lake Norman, Charlotte area, we do have people coming up from Charlotte, and I'm not sure if we're on the way to becoming a JGS or not, or whatever, but right now it's open to everyone, and it's being held. We're having monthly meetings. We have a meeting June 23rd at 1 o'clock at Temple Kol Tikva in Davidson, and then we're going to break for the summer, and then we'll be back again in September.
Oh, that's great. I met a very nice young man who was president of the congregation in Davidson at a URJ president's meeting.
Maybe Ernie.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it just took my breath away that there was a synagogue in Davidson. That's
Oh, yeah.
that's
Well,
all I have to
that's it. That's it.
And
It's-
Rhoda, don't forget that we have a lot of speakers, talented speakers in our group who can do Zoom
Mhm.
presentations, and you might be able to entice them to come over to Davidson. It's only about a 2.5-hour drive from the Triangle. So just remember that we are a resource for you.
Okay, thank you very much.
That's
Just
great.
wanted to let you know
Congratulations.
we're sort of alive and well in North Carolina.
Thank you. Our speaker today is Janice Sellers, and she has been a speaker before, and we liked her, so we invited her back. She is related to Peter Sellers and to John of Gaunt, son of a king and father of a king. At least that's what her grandparents told her. Unfortunately, they were both wrong, but that's why she's been researching her family for more than 45 years and is now a professional genealogist. She's going to be talking today about using online historical Jewish newspapers for genealogical research. Newspapers are valuable because you can find information on births, marriages, deaths, moves, businesses, naturalizations, court cases, and more. Her presentation will give us an overview of what's online and where to find it. And as somebody who grew up in a household where the arrival of the Jewish exponent every Friday in the mail was a big event in our house, I'm looking forward to Janice's talk. So if you're ready, Janice.
I think I am.
All right.
It worked a little while ago. We'll see if it works again.
And Janice, your handout is also in the group chat. So everyone, if you will open up chat, you should be able to see a link to it. I've also posted it on our website, and I know that Ava will be sending out a reminder with notes and a link to the video. So even if you can't find it in chat, it'll be available to you. Okay, Janice, take it away. There you go. You look good on screen here.
Okay, it's working so far. Always a good sign. Let's see. Yep, still working. So, when you're doing genealogy research, why should you care about newspapers in the first place? Well, you'll find the normal stuff with birth, marriage, and death announcements, but you can find things like school and college attendance, lots of legal notices, sometimes announcements about who's naturalizing, who's suing whom, when someone has registered for land, business news, especially in smaller, more local newspapers. They might have profiles about local businesses. You'll find social notes in local news, otherwise known as gossip columns. Who is doing whom? There you go. Sometimes you'll find information about people traveling by ship and train when it was still a new special thing. You can find job information, people starting jobs during World War I and World War II. You might have a serviceman of the day photograph. If it's a smaller local paper, sometimes they will talk about who moved into town and who left town. Lots and lots of photographs. In Jewish newspapers in particular, you'll often find news of the old country or news about the war, depending on the time period, of course. So obviously you can find tons of information to flesh out your family history this way. Luckily for us, a lot of digitized and online Jewish newspapers are available for free, so it doesn't even cost you money to keep up with them. The National Library of Israel has a specific mandate right now that they're trying to collect and digitize as many Jewish newspapers, period, that they can get from anywhere, anytime. And so it's probably the largest collection online right now. The Joint Distribution Committee actually digitized and put online a bunch of newspapers that were published in Cyprus when people were trying to get to mandate Palestine, mandate Israel, and the British weren't letting them in. They bounced them all over to Cyprus. And then they started publishing newspapers about what was going on. The Internet Archiva Jüdischer Periodika, otherwise known as Internet Archive of Jewish Periodicals, is available at University of Frankfurt. Those are almost all German language newspapers, and a lot of them in Fraktur type script. Leo Beck Institute has lots of German language newspapers also. The Florida Jewish Newspaper Project, because, you know, all good New York Jews go down to Florida to retire. My grandmother did. They have their own collection of Jewish newspapers. Pittsburgh has a rather unique newspaper collection. It is the only site I know that has said, these are all the newspapers we're going to digitize. Oh, we have them all. We're done. Except for a couple missing issues, there are no plans to add anything else to that collection, and that is unusual in today's world. They constantly want new material, so you'll come back and look for more. There are also several newspapers that are digitized and online as an individual newspaper, and these are just some examples. So depending on where your family was from, there is a reasonable chance that there was a Jewish newspaper serving that area, and it might be digitized and online. Chicago Sentinel is one of my favorites for research because it really covered the Jewish community in depth, and I have found lots and lots of stuff in there. Have you found that collection, Debbie?
I have not. And I'm writing, I'm taking notes. You already hit 3 of my buttons here, some more leads.
There
Thank
we
you.
go. But yeah, Chicago Sentinel, really good. There are also subscription for paid Jewish newspapers online. The most significant ones have been digitized by ProQuest. ProQuest is one of 3 large international information conglomerates that have specifically focused on digitizing a lot of newspapers, and in particular, ProQuest and Newsbank have digitized most of the larger newspapers that still are being published today. ProQuest somehow got the Jewish ones. These are very expensive subscriptions. Sometimes they're not even available to individuals. You usually have to find them at institutions that can afford to pay the price that ProQuest requests. Well, ProQuest demands. If you have a university or a research institution near you, or possibly if you're in the area where one of these is based, you might find it available online somewhere near you. And then a lot of the general newspaper databases have some Jewish newspapers. No particular focus on collecting them. I think it's more along the lines of, oh, look, we can digitize this also. And so it's in their collection. But it always pays to look at these multi-newspaper databases to see if there's some Jewish content in there. So what are you going to find online when you look at Jewish newspapers? As with most of the newspapers nowadays, most sites that have them have some kind of a searchable index with all the images. The images, of course, are what grab our attention, but it certainly is nice to have an index so you can find things a lot more easily. Some sites actually only have images, which is easier in one way because you can just slap the files up. And you have to browse, but it's kind of like when we had the more recent censuses available before they created the index. And it's nice to have it at home where you can look at it for free. And some places only have some kind of an index. It might be a searchable index, which is more programming because you have to have the database back there and be able to set up the front end. And some of them, like a lot of genealogy societies, maybe will create an index to birth, marriage, death information in a newspaper. And they'll usually tell you what issue it was in, what page it was on, and often will give you a way of getting that information from them. Oh, you can send us $5 and get a copy of this article, kind of thing. When you're searching newspaper databases, things you want to think about. How was the database created? Was it electronic? Is it a transcription, or is it OCR? Now, almost all modern newspapers are done electronically, and usually the index is created simply by taking all the text that was in that issue and dumping it into the search database. So it's a literal one-for-one word matching. If it's something is spelled wrong in the newspaper, it's going to be spelled wrong in the index. Excuse me. For older newspapers or indexing projects, a lot of times it'll be a transcription. A person, a couple people, or a group went through and found all of the birth notices and created a spreadsheet or a database with that you can now search. So varying quality control on that. Did they go back and proofread it at all? Did anybody look at this one person who said, I've been working on this for 20 years and here's my database? Did anybody go back and check it? Probably not. If it was a group project, maybe a little better chance of some kind of quality control. But a lot of times these are simply done one pass through, create the index. Okay, now we have something we can look at. So it may or may not be totally accurate. Historical newspapers, though, almost all of them are done by optical character recognition, which is a type of a program that is set up to look at an image, recognize what the letters are, and then create words based on that. So if this page were scanned with OCR, it might read this, oh, Quality. Okay, point, the word quality goes into the searchable index. And that depends entirely on the quality and condition of the materials that are being scanned. Modern OCR runs about 95 to 98% accurate with pristine copy. Most historical newspapers are not pristine. You have folds, you have tears. If it's more than 100 years old, you might have ink blotches or places where the type was wearing down, so you've got parts of letters that have dropped out. So there are a lot of reasons why OCR on old newspapers isn't 100% accurate. And as long as you take that into account and say, okay, I can't find it by searching, can I do something else? You're okay. Just don't expect OCR to find everything for you. Look at the database. Can you access the materials more than one way? Obviously, I've been talking about searching in the index. If the index fails you, if you cannot find the item you're looking for and you're sure something should be there, can you simply browse through the newspaper, find a particular day, and look page by page? And experiment to see how your searches work. Sometimes they're not programmed properly with the database. I searched in a database on Ancestry one time for upstate New York, and it told me there were no Smiths. Yeah, that's believable, isn't it? And I tried and tried. Okay, fine. there was another field on that search page that said keyword, and I put the word Smith in there. What do you know? I found all the Smiths. So simply the way that they had set that database up was not correlating properly with the actual database for the search page. If it's not logical, beat it into submission until it works. You've never done that, have you, Rhoda? If you find something, copy it. It might not be there tomorrow. The ephemeral nature of the internet says that sometimes things go away. I found an obit for a family member in the Poughkeepsie Journal on Ancestry, and I went back the next day and it was gone. And that's when I found out that Ancestry licenses some of its databases, and apparently the day I found that was the last day they had the license. And the Poughkeepsie Journal didn't come back online for 2 years. So you never know. Grab it while it's there. And the flip side of that, which I alluded to when I was talking about the Pittsburgh newspaper project, check back with the databases on a regular basis. They usually are adding new material as often as they can, especially the subscription ones. They want you to keep coming back. Even if it's an area you're still studying and they already have it, maybe they've added new issues. Sometimes they do them in batches. Sometimes they'll find missing issues and add them. Or if you're now researching a new area for your family, oh, they moved from this state to that state. Now you need to go back and look for material for the new state. So go back and look to see. And last but not least, those indices are sometimes updated. Sometimes they get information from another place, or someone goes through and does quality control. We know that doesn't happen at Ancestry. Never hurts to go back, and your skills may have changed. You may be searching differently now. So as I said, the National Library of Industry, the National Library of Israel, really has the biggest collection now for historical Jewish newspapers because they're specifically going out and looking for them everywhere they can. And the homepage has this lovely about talking about the Jewish press. Yeah, we're genealogists. Let's dive into the material. You can search and browse the newspapers. You can also search here, but the homepage and just a one-line search, not the best use of your time for searching. That's how most sites are set up. You're much better off if you find if there's a more detailed search page so you can have a more focused search rather than, oh, give me the word Cohen in every Jewish newspaper. Good luck with that. So when you click that, you get, oh, look, they put the titles in alphabetical order. Not the most helpful thing because you can name it anything. It doesn't give you an order in which it's easy to find something unless you have a specific title name you're looking for. Luckily with them, come here, cursor, all of these are actually clickable, so you can sort them in different ways, including language, where it was published, which country. They tell you the first issue and the last issue they have available online. Not necessarily great for searching per se, but when you find a newspaper, it lets you know, oh, I want to find something in the Spanish newspaper, but it's 1929 and 1932. My family was there and they left before 1929. Not going to help me probably. You can sort by the region and say, what region do I want to look for newspapers in? Since, yes, we still have a very Ashkenazic system out here, I picked Eastern Europe as an example. So now it's just doing Eastern Europe, still doing it by alphabetical order. But again, these are also, you can sort them by any of these that you want to. I arbitrarily picked a newspaper to look at and say, Hamagid, tell me about it. So it gives you information about what they have online, what language it's in, which country or countries it was published in, specific cities, how often it was published. It's nice to know who brought it to you, but for purposes of our research, not always the most important information. And a description of the newspaper itself, usually with history, when did it start, especially if it changed locations, maybe what caused that to happen. And here you can actually browse through and say, oh, look, 1856, August, September, October, what happened in November? Remember I said sometimes they are missing issues, but then everything else is filled in nicely. So you know that they have pretty solid coverage through those years. and you can search in there. So now I put in the word Russia just to show it's important to keep in mind what language it was published in. No results. Oh, wait, maybe it's not spelled that way in Hebrew. Oops. Thank heavens for those of us who don't read Hebrew. Steve Morris comes to the rescue because he has his lovely alphabets thing. So I ask for a Hebrew translation. And this is his Hebrew page, and you can translate from Hebrew into English or English into Hebrew. So translating a word from English to Hebrew, I type in the word Russia. And what do I get? He gives you 3 options. Again, I don't read Hebrew. I really don't know what the difference is between these. I can see that the letters are very similar between these two, but there are little fiddly bits that are different. And on the other hand, I'm a big Google fan, or at least I have been. I'm starting to stray. So he showed click here for results from Google. And it shows the where my pointer is disappearing. So say, okay, that's what Google says it is. I can copy and paste that, even if I don't read Hebrew. Now I can search for that. Oh, look, 1,327 results. Because I typed in the right language. Makes a difference. So I look through and you can see where it's highlighted. Again, for me,
I can't read.
I'm not getting any additional information from that. But I can pick one of them and say, what is this about? When you click on it, you get to see the images that they've scanned. It highlights for you whatever this word is as far as one unit. So this may or may not actually be one article, depending on how they've broken it up, but they've got it separate from this one. Okay, but I have my article and I have all the text. It also does language. It does the Yiddish. So if you're specifically looking for Yiddish language newspapers, maybe that's what your family spoke at home, you can just look for the Yiddish ones, including ones published in North America. I was told my great-grandfather read a Yiddish language newspaper his whole life after he immigrated here.
Mhm.
Now, Compact Memory is one of the German sites. It's housed at the University of Frankfurt, and it is a wonderful collection for German language information. Here is your little search thing. This is the basic one. Search details, but you have the tiny little magnifying glass. If you don't speak the language of a site, if it's in a different language, that's your hint for your search. I arbitrarily picked a nice German sounding name. What does Rosenberg give me? And I actually got 12,000 results for Rosenberg. It defaults you to 10 results per page. You can go up to 100 if you want. If I'm going to slog through things, I want to look at as many on one page as possible. So I arbitrarily picked one. The World, what was it? Events in Palestine, Adam Rosenberg. So you can click on it. You can download the entire PDF if you want, or you can click on it to actually see more. Oh, look, it's that wonderful Fraktur type script. But I can read the name, Adam Rosenberg. Excuse me. You can save this and download it. You can, all the free sites except one, you can save all this stuff. So you can keep your own copy. Remember, save it while it's there. It might not be there tomorrow. And there you go. You get a PNG. Let me see what happens when I type in the word Russia to a German language site. I actually did get some results, a little over 600. So there are some English language materials in here. And this one's German, but it's still showing as a result for Russia. But if I go back and type in Russland, which is the German word for Russia, I now have 35,000 results. So significant difference. I put in Podolia in German. That's where my great-grandfather came from. I actually get 1,400 results, including Jews in Volhynia, Podolia, and the Ukraine. Well, that's where my great-grandfather was from. This is actually an article, not a newspaper per se, but an article. So there's different kinds of materials in this particular collection, and you can save that and then work on translating it. Now, the Florida Project I mentioned, they have a huge collection of Jewish newspapers at the University of Florida libraries. One of the interesting things, these Jubilee issues have never been cataloged by the library when they started this project. Most archives never have a complete index catalog of everything they hold because it's hard to keep up and they're always getting new material. One of the nice benefits of a lot of places digitizing their collections, even if they don't actually create a catalog of it and it's still only available by search, at least it's more findable than it used to be. So thank you, University of Florida, for starting this. Their particular collection, you can find, they have different languages here: English, Yiddish, German, Hebrew, Dutch, Spanish, which only has one. Different publishers, different topics. So they had newspapers, way of life, periodicals as a broad thing, Jewish art, Jews in South Africa. And they also do it by different geographic areas. So if you're searching for a specific area, you can restrict your search that way. They actually have a very robust computer logic type of search that you can use. Not most sites for newspapers don't give you a lot of options for searching. So this one is particularly nice because they do all of that. They tell you right up front, you can do quotations like with Google. Capitalization does not matter. You can use Boolean operators. One of the important things, oh, my little nav bar from, go away, go away. That nav bar gets in the way. They actually take into account diacritical marks. Most search pages nowadays don't. If you put in an accent or don't put in an accent, you're going to get the same results. They tell you, yes, it will make a different search. When you're dealing with foreign language newspapers, that can be actually quite important. I decided to type Brainian. I have a family line of Brainians. They're usually totally overwhelmed by the famous Brainians who are from the same area. And there were no other Brainians around, but their snooty genealogist in the family said, no, you are not related to us. We are an important family. They named a hospital in Israel after us. Well, thank you very much, Max. Yes, he really did that, and that's exactly how he talked. Not to say ill of the dead. I'm sure he knew very much about the family, but he didn't want to be associated with my poor Brainians. And as usual, first hit, Reuben Brainian, very, very famous. I'm sure I'm related to them, but Max didn't want to talk to me. So when you get results like this, you can click on it. There's your issue, and you can go to different pages in it. I will go into a little more detail about dealing with these, but you can find your article on that page. You can save this. Like I said, almost all the free sites you can save. That's one of the wonderful things. I looked up their one Spanish language one. It was from Buenos Aires. Kind of an interesting cover, very primitive. One of the things that a lot of these newspapers and journals have, though, are ads. You might find an ad for your family member in here. Even though these get scanned and they are OCR'd, ads don't always, because of the layout, it's not words straight back and forth in a column. They're not always very findable in the same way that plain text is. If you think you had a family member with ads, you might need to actually browse to find them. The search won't turn them up quite as effectively. The other thing that causes that too is sometimes when they use different fonts. Now, these are all pretty straightforward fonts. OCR doesn't deal well with non-vanilla font, like italics, has a lot of trouble interpreting it. Some specific fonts OCR has problems with. Now, as I said, there are other things you can look at. Thumbnails. This is a way to tell when there are missing issues. So they tell you, oh, issue missing or not available. Sometimes they will be able to fill these in later. So if there's an issue that you couldn't find, go back in a few months, a year, and check again. But they actually let you know which ones they have gaps for. Not everybody is that nice. You can create it as a zoomable image, and then now the nav bar is in the way again. Bink, 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 bink. There we go. So you have to go to that to make sure you can do that, but then you get to zoom in and make it bigger, and there's my pointer. Now, the advanced search, you can say, where do you want to do it? Is it part of the title? Is it part of the creator? Is it a subject keyword? They've done a lot of back end stuff on making these more refinable in your searches. So take advantage of that, especially if you have a common name. If you have a Cohen in your family, narrow it down a little bit. Anywhere, look at all the tagging they have done for you. They have sorted this stuff and looked through it and said, oh, that's a subject, that's the city, that's the country, all sorts of stuff that will help you find things. Here's the Pittsburgh Jewish Newspaper Project I told you about. They give you a nice little background. This has gone through a few different websites, currently and still for a while residing at Carnegie Mellon, but it might go away and end up on somebody else's site again. These are the 3 newspapers, Chronicle, Criterion, and Outlook. And there was also a Y series that they put in this collection. That's it. There are some missing issues. If they get some of those issues, they'll add them. But other than that, this is a static collection. It is all they have for Pittsburgh Jewish newspapers and the one periodical. But you can also do different search types, search by date. So they give you a range of things too. And I like this. If PDFs will not display correctly in your mobile browser, newspapers are one of those things you should probably do on a desktop because you got big pages. Not going to be as easy to look at everything if you're doing it on a phone. But they tell you how to deal with it. Click the magnifying glass. It'll help. So one of the families I have researched in Pittsburgh, kind of like an after the fact, because it's not the reason I started looking in Pittsburgh, was Soblodovsky. So when I do Soblodovsky, it tells me there's a massive 5 results in their entire database. There are actually more than that, but it's OCR. Not all of it's scanned very well. But it gives you a rank. I'm like, I haven't figured out what that is. I want the term. What is this rank? Don't know. Which date, which of the newspapers it shows up in. You click on it, it gives you a nice bright yellow thing. You can see it right there. Mr. and Mrs. E. Steinfurst of Titusville, Pennsylvania, have returned home after a few days visit with Mr. and Mrs. L.I. Soblodovsky of Fifth Avenue. Social notes columns are great because, okay, why are Mr. and Mrs. Steinfurst visiting Mr. and Mrs. Soblodovsky? And I eventually found out that Mrs. Soblodovsky is Mr. Steinfurst's sister. So they actually showed up in there. You can save this, saves you as a nice little PDF. That's how they scan theirs. I mentioned a lot of places will allow you to browse. So they do each of them as a separate browse section. And then you can, sometimes you might want to browse, not only if you can't find something, but maybe you want to see what was going on in that community at a given time. You can just read the newspaper like you would today. Jewish Telegraph Agency, technically not a newspaper, kind of like the AP. They create stories, they send them to other newspaper outlets, but they have an archive of the stories they have created. And because they have been around for a very long time, one of the really useful things in this is that they were covering a lot of the pogroms and wars in Eastern Europe and what was going on in the communities our ancestors were coming from. So you can find historical information here to help supplement what you're doing with your research. They have a very basic search. Okay, let's put in Kishinev. That's where my great-grandfather and his siblings and father came from to this country. And you get, 679 results. Well, that's actually quite a bit. You can sort them by different things. I usually sort by date because the default is usually relevance. Well, how are they defining relevance? Kind of like Facebook. They don't tell you. Now, at least they are not trying to just make money off of you, unlike Facebook would. Relevant is something that points you to an ad or whatever, or how many people liked it today. I don't think that's how they're doing relevance, but if the word is there, what's making one result relevant over another? Can't quite figure that out. Date. I know what the date is. That's more logical. And you can scroll through, now they have it, you can do it by oldest or newest, so you can figure out where you want to look. But you get all sorts of stuff. So Jewish World, gleaming new JCC reflects tensions. And we have JCCs in Kishinev and Moscow. Okay, I know what that one's about now. klezmer aficionados, refugees arrive in Israel from war-torn Moldova in 92. They're covering the entire world. Here we have Yassi and Kishinev Jews demand energetic action. Excuse me. Report anti-Jewish excesses again from Kishinev. Now, this is from 1930, so it's a precursor to the war, but it tells you what's going on in a given area. Lets you know sometimes what helped motivate your family to move, depending on when they left. I put in the infamous Brainian again, and most of them are about Reuben Brainian. Nothing against Reuben, but I'd like to find something about my own Brainian sometime. Sometime. So I zoomed in and it's like, okay, let's look at some of these in a little more detail. They still do this a little bit. So here, I clicked on this as a hit for Brainian. Kodrino who murdered Yassi police chief Reed. There's no Brainian in this article. Other things published on the same day. Good old Reuben, he's back again. That's what triggered this result. Because that's a fairly static list that they attach to things published on the same day. So sometimes you have to do the extra step to figure out where's the term I'm searching for. But I did find it. And of course, Reuben Brainian, 1926, arrives in Moscow. He obviously was a very famous man, more famous than anybody in my family. I have done searches Brainian, no Reuben. The forward. This is the closest we've had to a national Jewish newspaper. And it wasn't technically that, but it had stringers around the country. It covered a lot of stuff from all around the country, stuff that may not have, if there was no newspaper in your area, maybe something showed up in the forward if it was big enough news. Used to be subscription only. They have now made it free access. So they have an archive online. They also have the current, and it's available in Yiddish. There we go. I don't read Yiddish either. I mean, if I don't read Hebrew, I'm probably not reading Yiddish, let's face it. However, this is mostly what you'll find easily here is the more current information, but it's all free now. Everybody can read all their articles. I still find useful stuff in there too. I've kept all these links over the years because you could get like 3 free a month. Now I can look at all of them. Okay, there are multi-newspaper collections that have some Jewish newspapers. I mentioned this before. If you're on a site with lots of newspapers, if you can find just a list of the newspapers, try doing a search on the page, find. They might have Jewish in the title, Israelite or Hebrew. Those are the common ones. Sometimes there are other names that you look at and go, oh, that's probably Jewish. Sometimes they're just very basic names, so they may not be immediately recognizable. But in all of these collections, and all of these are free collections that I'm pointing at right now, there are Jewish newspapers in there. So you can go there and find stuff that if your family's from this area, go look to see what's there. Now, Google News Archive, Google's an interesting company. They have lots of really cool ideas and lots of suggestions for, wouldn't this be neat? On the other hand, it's also a business. So sometimes they try things and they say, this isn't working out the way we thought, or this isn't something we can monetize. Maybe we need to get rid of it. Google News Archive used to be more extensive, and then they said, this isn't really doing what we want. We're going to get rid of it. And there's a great hue and a cry. No, bring it back, bring it back. We were really using that. And they did. And people used it, and then they took it away again. And people said, no, we really, really want it. As of right now, it's still available. It's static. They're not adding to it. But because they have already looked at it in the past and said, I don't know if we really want to keep this, at any point in time, they could just say, nah, it's not worth it to us, and they could yank it. I actually recommend you start looking through this first, just in case. Last time I looked, and like I said, as far as I can tell now, it's static. These are all the Jewish titles they had on the site. So quite a few different areas. Some of them are also in different places, but this is one place they're all together, which is convenient. You can click on it and say, oh, look, they have one issue of the Jewish Guardian. Nothing. Oh, there's another one. So it's scattered issues. I have no idea how they created this collection because that's a really big gap. But you can look at the issue, browse through it, find out all sorts of cool things. How do I print or download an article or photo? Does not currently offer a direct way to download or print articles. If you'd like to purchase content, contact the news source. That was not the answer I was looking for. They used to let you download stuff. And in this back and forth, and I don't know if we want to keep it, they stopped. Anybody can use screen capture. That is one thing that the web cannot prevent that I have ever found. So if you have a PC, you can do this through the operating system. There's a paid program called Snagit that I have used, don't really like very much. There's a free program called OrphanView. You can say, I want to capture this image on the screen, and you've got your newspaper article. And on a Mac, it's part of the operating system also. I really wish Mr. Irfan would make OrphanView for Mac, but not happening. So you find something really cool on there. No, you cannot download it, but yes, you can capture an image of the screen and save it that way. And then if you really want a nicer copy, because that will be screen resolution, which is low, as they say, you can contact the news source. But yeah, very frustrating. They used to let you download and then stopped. Ooh, I never thought of that till now. I wonder if maybe they digitized stuff without asking permission, and that's why they had to stop. That could be. They give you a wonderful page on how to search in there. Different kinds of operators you can use to restrict your search results, including how to do a specific newspaper. So I can go back and say, I want to look for the word. These are not tagged names. It's just a word on the page. Cohen in the Canadian Jewish Chronicle. So I do that and it says, oh, look. All these are the word Cohen shows up on and this is actually pretty reliable. Unlike modern Google search results, which you look up and down and can't find your search term a lot of times. This actually works. You search for the word, it's going to show up there. So there's my article, Palestine, Benjamin, by Gabriel Cohen. And then, like I said, you want to keep a copy, do a screen capture. SFU digitized newspapers. And that is Simon Fraser University in British Columbia. Used to be Multicultural Canada. And if I remember correctly, that site was actually a government site. So at some point, they decided they didn't want to maintain it. And I guess Simon Fraser said, no, don't make them go away. We'll host it. We will keep them alive. They have 3 Jewish newspapers on this site. Canadian Jewish News, Canadian Jewish Review, and Jewish Western Bulletin. I have found lots of information about my Canadian cousins in these newspapers. These tend to come kind of local, but really cover the whole country. So they're pretty handy to have. Now, I mentioned ProQuest. The big Jewish newspapers that are still being published that they have, or most of the content they have digitized is historic. But they still have them locked up in subscriptions that are really expensive. On the positive side, they do a lot of tagging and make it easier for you to narrow your search results. I don't think it justifies how much they charge, but they charge what the market will bear. I'm not going to complain too much. It's digitized and online. One time when I was still in Oakland in the Bay Area, I got a trial for our library on using the ProQuest Jewish Collection. Personally, I thought that was a brilliant way to get access. I think we had access for 2 weeks or something, and I mowed through them and looked for everything I could find. Oh, it was a 15-day trial remaining. There we go. Oh, now the nav bar's in the way again. So I actually knew the name of at least one cousin at that time who was in Jerusalem. So I said, let me look for my cousin at Jerusalem Post. Now, this is the basic search. Like I said, most sites nowadays will give you this. Unless you have an incredibly uncommon name or term you're looking for, I just don't recommend that on any site. You will be overwhelmed with hits, and then you get frustrated, and then you're not going to be able to find what you're looking for. But they have a very nice advanced search. This is part of what that subscription cost is paying for. So you can search for multiple terms. You can look for it anywhere. You can look for it in specific parts of the newspapers. You can restrict it by date. They have things tagged as articles, obituaries, advertising. So they've gone in and they have added value to it. Again, sort results by relevance. What? They don't tell you how they're defining relevance. I try to avoid that kind of a results list because of that. And you can also, the default is 20 results per page, but here, let's look for Sam Dubiner. I want it oldest first, and you can go up to 100 results per page. More efficient. And I got 49 results of Sam Dubiner. I think this is my cousin. I'm still working on this. I only seem to find one Sam Dubiner in the newspapers, but I don't know enough about my cousin. But it was a cool search to find 49 results. This guy shows up in the paper quite a bit, really. And the oldest one was 1957. Now, you are looking for Jewish newspapers. How do you find out? Was there a Jewish newspaper in the community I'm researching? Well, for the United States, you can go to Chronicling America and look in their little search thing for the newspaper directories. You can also, what are you doing? You can also look at the ancestor hunt. This is a guy who is obsessed with newspapers, and he has created so many search tools and other things that it's worthwhile to look at this guy if you want to do newspapers. And he has added a page, Historic Jewish Newspapers Online. Why, thank you. I can look at that list. If you want to find newspapers for other countries, mouse, don't do that. The Union list of digitized Jewish historic newspapers, and the links for these are on the handout. You don't need to copy them down. You can check that. You can sort, I think it's sorted by country. It has different languages. It's a wonderful list, and I'll show you that in a second. If you're just kind of like shooting in the dark, Google the name of your place, wherever you're looking for, and the words Jewish newspaper. Now that is English. So if you're looking for a different country, find the translation in that language of Jewish and newspaper and do your search for the name of the place and those words. Oh, I forgot that. Come on, there you are, pointer. Bah. Now this is the Chronicling America site is in the process of changing its interface, but they're not fully transitioned. This is still the old interface, but the new one will be similar. Everybody always goes, ooh, look at the pretty images. Not the best part of this site. U.S. Newspaper Directory. They are constantly adding information to this database. It is a database of all newspapers published in the United States that the Library of Congress has information on. So even if it isn't digitized, if they know it existed, it's going to be in this list. Let's see. Jewish newspapers published in New York from 1690 to 2013. What do we get? 220. That's a lot. I may not want to look at everyone, but sorted by relevance again. How are they defining relevance? I still don't know. But you get a nice little list. When you click on one, oops, I'll do that in a second. I'm sorry. Show you that example. Now the Union list, this is the one I mentioned. So it lists publications in multiple languages. You get the title, where it was published, years covered, language. If it's digitized, they give you a link to it right there. And whether it's free or pay, that's pretty convenient. So here's the list. It was actually updated most recently a couple months ago. They do the titles in alphabetical order. Again, not the most helpful because you could name it anything. But they cover all this material and you can just go scrolling through the list and say, where do I want to find something? Now, how do you find it online? Specifically, these multiple newspaper sites, as I've shown, have lists of the newspapers. Look through the list. Is your town there? If not, you can try that searching just for Jewish or Israelite or Hebrew to see if something shows up in a title. Oops. Chronicle America and Union, the Union list, if it's digitized, they link you to it right away. So it's even easier to find. So here's Genealogy Bank. You can look as a list of newspapers by state. So you can, okay, my relatives were in New York, then look at the New York list. Sometimes your newspaper isn't online. You have looked everywhere. Now what do I do? Where's it available offline? You can use the internet to help you find that information. If it's close to you, go. Like I used to live in Oakland, really close to Berkeley. University of California at Berkeley has a huge newspaper collection. So if it wasn't online, the first thing I would do was check the Berkeley catalog to see if they had it there. Sometimes it wasn't there. Sometimes they didn't have the issues I wanted. If it's nothing close to you, interlibrary loan can help you even with newspapers. So this is that list of New York newspapers I showed. And their Arbeiter, the Workman, is one of those newspapers my great-grandfather used to read, according to my mother. So along with this information, what's the title, other names it might have gone by, where was it, what coverage, who published it, years it was published, how often, this one was in English, libraries that have it. You will get a list of usually multiple libraries, but the important information you need to know, what kind of form is it in? A microfilm master is exactly what it sounds like. This is what they're making additional copies of microfilm from. Sometimes you'll see where it's actually the hard copy newspaper. That doesn't circulate. The master doesn't circulate. But if you get a microfilm service copy, that circulates just like a book. So you can request that through interlibrary loan, which is back and alive again after everything has opened up with COVID. During COVID, much more restrictive use of this. But now you can do it. So I went down to the Oakland Public Library in time, and their fee for filing an interlibrary loan request was $2. And I used it twice. One time I got 3 microfilms that I had for 6 weeks because there's no time limit. And I just kept no index. So I had to scroll through them individually to look for all the articles I wanted. Another time I wanted one article from a socialist newspaper that wasn't online. I paid $2. I got the microfilm. I got my article and I gave them back the microfilm. But it's just like a book functionally for the purposes of interlibrary loan. So go ahead and get it. Okay. Other than I can type in the word Russia and translate it into Hebrew. Okay, now I have a Hebrew language newspaper. I don't read Hebrew. What do I do? You can OCR it if it isn't OCR'd already, or if you can't download it as text. There's a free online tool called i2OCR. There's another one that I also list on the handout. And what you do is you download your image, tell it what language you want it to be in, and it will extract that text and give you text as a result that you can now copy and paste. And then so here, I'm uploading that article about that where Russia showed up in the headline from Hamagid. And I say, I want it in Hebrew. And you get this little spinning thing that says, yeah, we're working on it. We're getting there. And then it gives me text. Because what I did, the way that they were doing those images, it was in pieces for the article. So first I downloaded the title to say, what is this about? Now I have copyable text that I didn't have before that I can put in Google Translate. Now, when you have a foreign language, even English too, it does this too, but especially useful for a language you yourself do not read and can't really tell the subtleties. Because this is how I got it from the OCR. And Google Translate will say, did you really mean this? Sometimes it really mangles it. But most of the time, it's refining it into the vocabulary it has built into its search engine thing. And so it's going to be an improvement. Not always, but usually. So especially if maybe this isn't making the best sense, go ahead and click that and see what it offers you as an alternative. Russian military. Oh, okay. Now I have an idea what this article's about. That said, even if you use Google Translate with the text to translate, consider that a rough translation. It's giving you the gist of the article. If it does look like something relevant to your research, I highly recommend you find someone to translate it manually, an actual person. Computer translation is really handy for quick and dirty. It will not give you the same kind of quality results that a person will who's translating it, because there are subtleties in language that they still haven't been able to program into computers. They're getting better all the time, but it's a very restricted view. It's hard to program all the possibilities. So if you want to get the fine details in an article, find someone who will translate it for you. There are people on Jewish Gen who do that voluntarily. There's a group on Facebook called Genealogical Translations. Those are great ways to do it for free. If it's a significant piece of text, as a translator, I highly recommend you offer to pay somebody so that you get good results. But unless it's really, really basic information you're getting from that article, don't rely only on the machine translation. So I2OCR also does Yiddish. There's another one online, New OCR, same kind of thing, but they're going to give you slightly different results because they're programmed slightly differently. It's like searching through the census on different sites, not the exact same search engine, slightly different results. There's also a program on tichnut.de, which is Germany. You can download onto your computer. It will do Hebrew and Yiddish. I have not tried that still. Haven't been doing as much newspaper research with foreign languages as I was, so I haven't been able to push myself to do it. But it's supposed to be a pretty decent program. And Google Translate now handles Yiddish. They've had Hebrew for a while. It took them a while. They got Yiddish. So that's another possibility for doing your translations. And that is the end of my talk about Jewish newspapers online. So I'm going to escape out of that. Unless if we need me to share again, I'll be happy to do that. But until then, I'm now ready for questions. And I saw that there were 2 new messages. I don't know if they are questions. So let's see. Oh, cool. Somebody was reading the Ford in Philadelphia. Yay.
That was
And
Barbara.
I was also told my great-grandfather used to read that, but he really, really read his socialist newspapers more.
I think there were a lot of Jewish immigrants from the Pale who were socialists and followed
Oh, yeah.
the labor movement and well, my fingers are literally itching to
Go off and look
get-
at newspapers.
get to
Good.
my computer and look further. I have found in the Toronto Jewish newspapers some very charming descriptions of things like bridal showers that were hosted by family. And I think
Ooh.
about these women who were probably in their 40s and 50s who either were immigrants or who were born here to recent immigrants, hosting these very English sounding teas at which Mrs. Metter was feted by her friends and all. I mean, it gives you, if you're looking for an answer to the question of what was their life like, it gives you some very
That's one of the wonderful things about the social notes. And one of the things about ethnic newspapers versus whatever the mainstream newspaper was in a particular area, they're usually going to cover that ethnic community in much more depth than the mainstream newspaper. So the Chicago Sentinel is going to have things like that, or the Toronto one, in-depth detail about the Jewish community that the main newspaper in that town may not carry to the same degree. So even if you find something in, say, the Chicago Trib, see if it's also mentioned in the Sentinel, because it's going to not only a different perspective from a different newspaper, but if it's that community, you'll probably find a little more information about it than you would in the mainstream newspaper. And the hosting the bridal showers, that's a very American and English kind of thing. Part of that's assimilation. They're finding out this is what their new friends are doing for their daughters, so now they're starting to do it.
Janice, you made a kind of just an offhand remark about straying from Google. And I wanted to follow up on that since a lot of us, well, I think Barbara calls Google Rav Google, Rabbi Google. Why are you straying and what are you straying to?
I still haven't found something really good to stray to, but I'm starting to experiment with DuckDuckGo, which has been touted over the years as a better option, primarily because of not following you and all the rest of that. But as Google is trying to streamline a lot of its offerings, and as mobile has picked up in popularity and usage, what I have discovered, because I relied entirely on Google. I mean, years ago when Yahoo still did searches, I used it a little bit, and Google simply gave me better results. I'm getting very frustrated with Google. Not only the ads, but simply the results themselves. I routinely find pages like, where's my search term? My search term doesn't show up anywhere on this page. I haven't figured out why it's giving me that, but I know a lot of it's driven by ad revenue and ad revenue desires. All I know is that the end result is the searches I have been making are not as productive. So DuckDuckGo is doing better, and I haven't fully strayed, but I'm thinking, making that my primary. I have tried Bing. Bing is still very much skewed towards selling you stuff, even the non-sponsored ads. A lot of the results are based on, oh, this is a company with that name. I don't care. What about my additional search terms I put in there? It's just their whole approach is really geared on pointing you to retail and things that you're going to buy. That's not what a historian or a researcher is looking for, but that's what their search engine is geared for. The average person who's like, where do I want to go to eat? Or where can I find this product? Well, fine. I'm not your target market.
Gosh, that's great.
I thought perhaps you were going to say that you are using, is it Gemini or Genesis? Genesis, or let me, we have a
Oh,
couple
I'm not
people-
touching AI at all. It drives me bleepity bleep crazy. I have a blog, and one of the memes I follow is Randy Seaver's Saturday Night Genealogy Fun. And one time recently he said, how are you using AI in your genealogy? Oh, I just wrote a scathing comment. He's like, wow, I put in all these terms and it wrote an obituary for me. And why couldn't you write it yourself? I put in all these terms and it wrote a little profile of my ancestor. And why couldn't you write it yourself? I mean, what I think AI is good for is huge data projects where humans simply cannot do that work in a lifetime, multiple lifetimes. That's what we should be using AI for, not, oh, I want it to write an obituary for me. No. Or I've forgotten whose page it was on, but somebody, I don't want to have AI do my reading for me while I do the laundry. I want AI to do my laundry while I do my reading. I mean, writing stuff that it is more productive for you in the long term to learn how to write a short paragraph. I don't care if AI can do that for me. That is not what I think is an intelligent use of computer power. Okay, there, that's my rant.
Well, I have had some success with ChatGPT instead of using Google or trying it with Google. I was looking for a very obscure piece of information about a subcamp of Dora Nordhausen during World War II. I actually couldn't find it on Google, but ChatGPT came back. Again, it's a synthesized answer. It's getting its answers from somewhere else.
Right.
But I had it in less than a second. I've also tried Gemini. Again, when it comes to writing prose, it does a reasonably good job, but is very bland. So I would agree with you, Janice, that if you're going to write a biography, do it yourself, but it can give you a start.
Now, well, I'm really curious that you said you tried searching for something with Google, couldn't find it, but that when you tried doing it through, well, did you actually do it with Gemini or ChatGPT? But that was able to drag up the information, because that makes me wonder if Google couldn't find it, how was the AI able to find it when it should be searching the same websites?
You would think.
So that's a very curious contrast.
Well, it's where something may show up in the pages and pages of links. So it's possible, and the ChatGPT response gave me information that I wasn't easily able to access.
Okay. So that's interesting. I'm curious how it is able to do that, because if I put in fairly specific search terms, I should be able to get a page that has that information. So I don't know how that works. It's interesting for you for that kind of result. Thank you for letting me know about it.
Sure. You might want to try ChatGPT and say, give me a list of Jewish newspapers and see what happens.
The Exponent, the Jerusalem Post. There you go.
Okay. Who
Well,
else
did
has
we
an
have any
observation?
other questions or comments? I didn't see actually any questions in the chat. I was kind of surprised. Well, that's true. And ChatGPT has been known to lie. All of them make some serious mistakes in not only the information, but how they collate it and how they put it together, which is also part of my frustration. It isn't going to work like a human brain. If it ever does, then we might have to worry about the machines taking over and saying we're not efficient enough and they get rid of us.
Well, in all fairness to the engineers, artificial intelligence, these like ChatGPT, it's a learning machine. So
Yes.
when you say it didn't tell you the truth or it made fiction out of something, if you correct it the next time around, it will be
It
right.
should improve. Well, and in that respect, it's like the machine translation.
Right.
Those are also using that same kind of machine intelligence. When you correct things on Google Translate, it is supposed to incorporate that for the future. But as I mentioned when I was talking about translations, it'll give you a rough idea. It'll give you the gist. And they've had, how long have we had Google Translate? That's years. And that's far less complicated than what ChatGPT and the other AI engines are doing. And Google Translate is still not something you should rely on 100%. So if I can't rely on that for something that's much more straightforward and has been adjusted and adapted for that many years, then why would I want to rely on the AI things that are saying, I can write this story for you? It gives you an idea. You need to take that and say, okay, and now let me refine it myself.
Okay.
But yeah, that is an interesting contrast. Randy's post in particular just drove me crazy because of the examples he said he was using it for. Write the bloody bio yourself. It helps you learn skills. It helps you collate the information better. Why would I want ChatGPT to do that for me? But that's me. You know, that obviously not my cup of tea. I know a lot of people are having really cool things with it. A lot of people are crediting it for all these discoveries in Family Searches labs where they're doing machine reading of the handwriting. Okay, sure, you can call that AI also, but it's finding words in a database. It's searching. That doesn't mean it's doing anything that drastically new. The new part is they've set it up so it can read handwriting. Awesome. Kind of like OCR. You still need to actually look at all those entries and make sure they're relevant for what you're trying. Yeah, Fulton History is actually one of the ones that I listed. Mr. Tryansky is still collecting newspapers. I still am trying to get Steve Morse to create a better search engine for that site, because even though he does have a very robust search process, it doesn't work as well as he touts it to, partly because of the way he scans the issues. One of the best ways to use Fulton History is search. Not that I'm complaining, I was just complaining about Google. Search through Google for your search term and say cite fultonhistory.com. You will usually get more consistent results that are easier to follow than if you search on Mr. Tryansky's site itself. But certainly if you have anything in New York State, you should be looking at Fulton History, because he started off in particular with upstate New York. When he'd run through all those newspapers, he started doing New York City area, and he ran through those he could get access to and said, okay, what else can I scan? And now he scans any newspaper anywhere in the world he can find. But it's not always the full page, and his search doesn't always find everything. And on top of that, I talked about OCR. Everything he's doing is public domain, which means at this point, 1925 is the most recent. And he's not always dealing with first generation copy microfilm. Looks like everybody here is old enough to remember the days of photocopiers and copying a copy of a copy of a copy, and how degraded that gets. Same thing with microfilms. Okay, there's the original newspaper. Then somebody microfilmed it. That's the first copy. Depending on how poor the quality of the paper was and the microfilming process, that may or may not be a great copy. Oh, but now you're making a copy of that and then somebody else is getting a copy of that. Maybe that third copy is what Tom is using on Fulton history. And it gets to be muddy. That's not his fault. He's going for what he can get access to. But it's something to take into account when you're searching. Even if the newspaper's there, maybe the part of the newspaper where your family member's wedding is described is where there's a big ink blob. And you might have to manually search that issue to find that. But if you want New York, oh my God, there's so much stuff there.
One of the things about Google is that recently I've noticed that when you put a search in, you get back a list of questions, which I guess are supposed to echo your search, but they don't necessarily.
It's kind of adding on to it, and in some ways it's other people who kind of like Amazon, other people who bought that book looked at these books. Oh, if you're interested in that topic, this is kind of something related to it. I have a friend who loves mutton, and one time I was trying to find somewhere to buy mutton, which is not particularly popular in the United States. One of those questions Google gave me was, why don't Americans like mutton? Which, of course, I had to tell my friend, see, Google knows Americans don't like mutton. But yeah, that's not supposed to be a result. It's just kind of like an extension of your topic. And it's been doing that for quite a while, even before the whole, ooh, AI is everywhere revolution. I think it's trying to help you find more information about whatever you're looking for.
Okay, who else would like to ask Janice a question?
Or
perhaps-
comments,
or
slings and
comments?
arrows.
Guide you in your search for family or family history.
Or did I just make you enthusiastic about diving into Jewish newspapers? That's cool.
Well, we have somebody here, Mike Holt, who is from Detroit. I imagine, Mike, you found a lot of stuff about your family in Jewish Detroit newspapers.
Yes. Am I muted? No, I'm
Yes.
not. Not only have I found a lot of stuff in the Jewish News, which is actually maintained, the archive is maintained by America's favorite university, the University of Michigan.
I know a song about that I will not repeat right now.
Okay. Anyway, they also have scans of the Detroit Jewish Chronicle, which started publishing in 1917 and goes through 1942 when the Jewish News started. So I found a lot of stuff mentions of my family, mostly social things. My grandmother hosting, a benefit for something or other. So you might want to add that to your list if you have any.
Yeah, if you find that your city published a Jewish newspaper, absolutely dive in. There will be lots of social information, like that little note from the Sentinel where the Steinfursts came to town to visit their relatives. Now it doesn't say how they're related, but I know they were in Chicago visiting, and then they went back to Titusville. That's so cool to learn.
It's also interesting to see how the local Jewish papers, for me, covered the Holocaust as it was happening.
Yeah.
I was sharing with Janice that I think there still is a Jewish Skokie press, which had also I just was playing around while you were talking, some great coverage of the 1977 attempted march by the neo-Nazis into the town, and how the Holocaust community in Skokie reacted. So, it's interesting to read the news from that day rather than listen to documentaries, because there is just news as it happens and how people are responding to it, not the way they're going to remember it later on. So I'll be spending some time doing that.
Cool.
Thank you.
Now I'm really curious. Let me see. I'm actually if I go to Chronicling America directory and look for Skokie. Oh, I forgot one thing.
Can you share your search with us, Janice? Just
Yes,
so we
I can. Hold on.
follow your
Okay.
technique.
Let me go back to here and say share screen. Share screen. Okay, so let me go back a page. So what I did, I went to Chronicling America. And like I said, the really useful part of this is the newspaper directory. And then I said, okay, because now I'm curious what Jewish newspapers were published there. So I go to Illinois. And since I'm looking for a specific city, I'll just go ahead and scroll through. Almost to the end. Where did Skokie go? It was there a minute ago. Come on, Skokie.
There it is.
Oops. Well, I can't see it because of that stupid nav bar. Come on, nav bar, out of the way. Yeah, that's where I want you. Good nav bar. Now we have to go back down. Skokie, Skokie, Skokie. Where did Skokie go? There it is. And if I say I want Jewish, there's Jewish. And there's my search. And I find out that there were two so far that they know about. Like I said, they do add information, but at this point, probably pretty reliable. Two newspapers published in Skokie: Chicago Jewish Start, 1991 to the current time, and Chicago Jewish News, 1994 to the current time. So it doesn't sound like there's anything historic in their database. That doesn't mean there wasn't something being published that was circulated to Skokie, but these are the ones that knows that were published in Skokie. If I want to find out about them, I say, okay, tell me what's going on here. Okay, Chicago area, Illinois, Chicago, Jewish newspapers, also issued by subscription via the World Wide Web. You're only going to see that on more modern newspapers. Now, one of the things that's really convenient too, kind of like what Mike was just saying about the earlier newspaper and then later it's the Detroit Jewish News. If it was one newspaper changing names and then that morphed into the Jewish News, it will essentially give you the genealogy of the newspaper in this information. So it'll say, you know, from this year to this year, it was this, and then it'll give you a link. Also look at, and you find out, oh, then the name changed to that, and maybe the name changed to something else. So especially more recently, as newspapers were combining before they died, you'll find that history of going back in time and what the different titles were. And let's see if, because 91 was the older one, libraries that have it. Where can I find the Jewish Star? Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library has microfilm service copies from 91 to 2003. If I wanted to do and there was no link to a digitized one, so I have no reason to believe, especially for the historic information, that it's online. I could borrow as many of those as I wanted to, or at least request them, and sit there and go through year by year on the Skokie Jewish newspaper. They also have a master. Okay. But they have a service copy from 91 to 2003. That's a good amount of time to learn about Skokie. Now here this is what they call them, original. 91 April, and then starting in September, and it has an open-ended, but there's no closed bracket. This looks like part of the entry was cut off. I don't know how long they actually have. This doesn't circulate. Those are hard copy newspapers that they have in the Historical Society. Public library, available as unspecified, but only retains the current 3 months. That sounds like they probably have a hard copy subscription, assuming that's still available. And after that, they do something with it. Maybe they give it to the Historical Society. Cornell, nobody knows what they have. They just have an unspecified one. Oh, updated 2014. Skokie Public Library, which is probably the hard copy, but unspecified. UCLA gets a hard copy or got a hard copy. So this is how you can look for your specific town and see what formats they have available where. And if I wanted to do the research on it remotely, I'm going to write to the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library in Springfield and order a bunch of microfilms. The other thing you can do you have friends or family living in the area? Sometimes you can send them to the library. Sometimes local libraries will have digital subscriptions that are available if you have a library card. When I was researching a DC area newspaper, I found out that the Enoch Pratt Free Public Library in Baltimore had and I'm still amazed. They have like 8 of the big ProQuest subscriptions. They have to have some kind of endowment to be able to afford that. I'm impressed. I told my brother, go down and get a library card. Thank you, Mark. And I used my brother's library card. Or like I said, if you can convince them to go down to do the research, have them do that if they don't want to share a library card. My brother was willing. But those are other ways of accessing these newspapers that are remote from where you are.
Thank you very much, Janice. Thanks for that live demonstration.
You're welcome. And well, if anybody else comments,
Just a
questions?
just a comment, and I had an
There's
important phone
Rhoda.
call. Here I am. Yeah, I'll see you in Philly. Um, I had an important phone call while you were talking, so you may have mentioned the gallery of missing persons in the forward.
I did not mention that. That's right, because that is a separate database. You're right, Rhoda.
It's a
I should
separate
include that
database,
as a separate link. Yeah,
and
the when
it's in
people were trying
Jewish
to find
Gen,
family members.
and that's where I found my great-grandfather, who was highly elusive. And sure enough, the family had put an ad in there, not an ad, but a listing in this gallery of missing husbands. It was in Yiddish, but it was clearly my family. And not only was he in there, but there was a picture of him that I had never seen before. So that was like a double whammy benefit. And that database is on Jewish Gen.
Thank you for mentioning that, Rhoda. I mean, I know about the
Yeah.
database, but I had
Mhm.
not thought about adding that specifically. I have now made a note that when I update this presentation, that will be included. So thank you very much.
And how do
Okay.
you access that again? The gallery of missing
Missing
persons?
husbands,
Yeah.
Missing
not persons, husbands.
When these men are coming over here and forgetting to continue to contact their family. Oops.
What, was that a newspaper?
It was in the forward. It was a feature
Oh.
in the
Yeah,
forward.
it was a specific feature in the forward.
Yeah, and it started because the forward, women started contacting them to put in these ads, and then it was so prolific in terms of of women who were asking for this service that they established this gallery of missing husbands, and it's been translated by Michael. I'm gonna say Morgenstern, but that might
Yeah,
not
no,
be
that's right.
right.
Morgenstern, who's he's in
Morgenstern.
LA. I think he still volunteers or works at the Holocaust Museum there.
Yeah, and he translated the whole series. I don't know what range of years it appeared in, but I can tell you, my guy was there.
That's cool.
It was very cool. I mean, it's sad, but it was very
Especially having
cool.
a photo. Wow.
And the photo, yeah, that was really the only other picture I had of him looks like an absolute mugshot. I mean, like a bad mugshot. And in this one, it was a formal photograph, very dapper looking. So it was more the image of a missing husband.
Well, yeah, but since he was one of those apparent husband deserters, maybe it should have been a mugshot.
Yeah.
Speaking of mugshots, what's your experience been at the way Jewish newspapers report Jewish crime?
I have not found a lot for the research I have done. I have certainly found reports of crime in the Jewish newspapers. Especially since these were primarily within the community, I haven't found that it was a subject that was avoided per se. Whereas a lot of times, because Jews have suffered so much persecution, they didn't necessarily talk about this outside the community because they didn't want another reason for people to say, Jews, bad. But I haven't seen totally shying away from it in the newspapers the same way. But I have also not necessarily seen the same kind of thing that's prolific in mainstream newspapers. If it bleeds, it leads. Yes, they covered the wars and they covered pogroms, but that was, I think, more of a public service kind of thing because this was something so important to the community. regular newspapers, the big murders and everything are always on the front page because that's what people look at. I have not seen that same kind of coverage of crimes leading the news in the Jewish newspapers. So it's more of it definitely seems to be more of a cultural thing serving the community than what a lot of the mainstream newspapers did about just, we want to sell copies. If that's what's going to get them to pick it up, that's what we put on the front page. So I hope that helps answer that a little bit.
It does. I have
I'm
some bootleggers on that tree,
Mhm.
and they did get arrested a time or two. So
I'm wondering if Ron Aarons might have some comments about that in one of his books.
I don't
No,
remember. I mean, I've heard Ron's talk about the crime and everything. I don't remember him talking about newspapers for a lot of his research. And I'm not saying he didn't use them at all,
yeah,
but I
I'm
don't
just,
think that was where he got a lot of his information, or at least I don't think he talked about it, because I've heard several of his talks and he didn't seem to rely as heavily on
yeah,
newspapers.
I'm
for
just
stuff.
thinking off the top
No,
of
no,
my
it's an
head.
interesting thought, because
No.
I don't remember him really discussing
Mhm.
newspapers very much.
Mhm.
Even with all the stuff with his great grandfather,
Your brother and all that, yeah.
I don't think he found a lot of stuff in newspapers, not necessarily because they didn't report it, which is kind of what Barbara was just asking about. More, I think, because his great grandfather was deliberately trying to stay under the wire in a lot of stuff.
As are a
Um,
lot of criminals, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, they don't want to be found.
yeah, exactly.
I don't see
Anything
any-
else?
I don't see any other questions in chat, but feel free to unmute if you'd like. We've got a wonderful resource right here in front of us, giving us her valuable time.
I love to talk.
and you do it well.
Why, thank you.
Okay. I have put the handout in our chat twice. It's also on our website under documents. And Janice, I want to thank you again for agreeing. This is, I think, your second presentation for us. And we certainly hope that you would consider perhaps a third sometime
I
next
would
year.
be happy to do that. Just figure out what you want me to talk about.
Okay. Well, thank you again for sharing your afternoon with us.
Thank you for inviting me. Everybody have a wonderful rest of your Sunday, and I look forward to seeing you at a future talk.
Okay. Thank you, Janice.
Take
And
care.
Barbara, I'll turn.
Hi, Rhoda.
Bye-bye.
Barbara, do you have any ending comments or observations for us as we're
I don't have anything else, just make sure that you're registered for our next meeting, and
yes, that will be in person at the Cardinal. It's a beginner's program, and like Barbara, I am always a beginner. I keep going to these DNA programs and hoping something will stick that I can actually use, but Al will lead us through that. And then on August 18th, as Barbara mentioned, Dr. Glenn Dinner, who wrote a book about Jewish tavern keepers in the 18 and 1900s, but he's also going to be talking about other occupations. A number of you had expressed you wanted to understand a little bit more about what did your ancestors do in the old country. So this will be a special program as well. And we have other programs coming up towards the as we start to take a look at fall and winter.
thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Good to see you all. Be well. And you'll be hearing from me and Ava a little bit later in the week. Take care. Bye-bye.